Welcome to Paul's Funhouse with a wild and weird abound. From the serious to the paranormal, there's no telling what you'll find. Hosted by Paul and friends, they'll take you on a wild ride through the realms of the unknown and the mysteries that hide. So come on in and take a seat, get ready for a show where anything can happen and the energy will flow. Welcome to the Funhouse, where the topics change and the lights are bright. It's a one-of-a-kind experience that will keep you up all night. So join Paul and friends and let the good times roll in the world of the Funhouse where anything goes. Let's go. Oh, oh,
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome back to Paul's Funhouse. Today, we will look at some ghost stories, starting with a throwback to an earlier video. Without further ado, I think we should dive right into it. The Bell Witch. The Bell Witch, or Bell Witch haunting, is a southern United States folklore legend centered on the 19th century Bell family of northwest Robertson County, Tennessee. Farmer John Bell Sr. resided with his family along the Red River in an area currently near Adams. According to legend, from 1817 to 1821, his family and the local area were attacked by a primarily invisible entity that could speak, affect the physical environment, and shapeshift. Some accounts also record the spirit as clairvoyant and capable of crossing long distances with superhuman speed or being in more than one place at a time. In 1894, newspaper editor Martin V. Ingram published his Authenticated History of the Bell Witch. The book is widely regarded as the first full-length record of the legend and a primary source for subsequent treatments. The individuals recorded in the work were known historical personalities. In modern times, some skeptics have regarded Ingram's efforts as a work of historical fiction or fraud. Other researchers consider Ingram's work a nascent folklore study and an accurate reflection of belief in the region during the 19th century. While not a fundamental element of the original recorded legend, the Bell Witch Cave in the 20th century became a source of continuing interest, belief, and generation of lore. Contemporary artistic interpretations, such as in film and music, have expanded the reach of the legend beyond the regional confines of the southern United States. In his book, An Authenticated History of the Bell Witch, author Martin V. Ingram published that the poltergeist's name was Kate after the entity claimed at one point to be old Kate Batts's witch and continued to respond favorably to the name. The physical activity centered on the Bell's youngest daughter, Betsy, and her father, and Kate expressed particular displeasure when Betsy became engaged to a local named Joshua Gardner. The haunting began sometime in 1817, when John Bell witnessed the apparition of a strange creature resembling a dog with the head of a rabbit. Bell fired at the animal, but it disappeared. John's son Drew Bell approached an unknown bird perched on a fence that flew off and was of extraordinary size. The daughter, Betsy, observed a girl in a green dress swinging from the limb of an oak tree. Dean, an enslaved person from the Bell family, reported being followed by a large black dog on evenings he visited his wife. Activity moved to the Bell household, where knocking was heard along the door and walls. The family heard gnawing on the beds, invisible dogs fighting, and chains along the floor. About this time, John Bell began experiencing paralysis in his mouth. The phenomena increased as sheets were pulled from beds when the children slept. Soon, the entity pulled hair and scratched the children, emphasizing Betsy, who was slapped, pinched, and stuck with pins. The Bells turned to family friend James Johnston for help. After retiring for the evening at the Bell home, Johnston was awakened by the same phenomena. That morning, he told John Bell it was a spirit, just like in the Bible. Soon, word of the haunting spread, and some traveled great distances to see the witch. The apparition began to speak out loud and asked, "Who are you, and what do you want?" The voice answered feebly, "I am a spirit. I was once thrilled, but have been disturbed." The spirit offered diverse explanations of why it had appeared, tying its origin to the disturbance of a Native American burial mound on the property. It sent Drew Bell and Bennett Porter on an unproductive search for buried treasure. With the emergence of entire conversations, the spirit repeated word for word 2 sermons given 13 miles apart simultaneously. The entity was well acquainted with biblical text and enjoyed religious arguments. As another form of amusement, the witch shared gossip about activities in other households and sometimes appeared to leave briefly to visit homes after an inquiry. John Johnston, a son of James, devised a test for the witch, something no one outside his family would know, asking the entity what his Dutch step-grandmother in North Carolina would say to the enslaved people if she thought they did something wrong. With his grandmother's accent, the witch replied, "Hut tut, what has happened now?" In another account, an Englishman stopped to visit and offered to investigate. On remarking on his family overseas, the witch suddenly began to mimic his English parents. Again, in the early morning, the witch woke him to his parents' voices, worried as they had also heard his voice. The Englishman quickly left that morning and later wrote to the Bell family that the entity had visited his family in England. He apologized for his skepticism. At times, the spirit displayed kindness, especially towards Lucy, John Bell's wife, the most perfect woman to walk the earth. The witch would give Lucy fresh fruit and sing hymns to her, and she showed John Bell Jr. a measure of respect. Referring to John Bell Sr. as Old Jack, the witch claimed she intended to kill him and signaled this intention through curses, threats, and afflictions. The story climaxes with the Bell patriarch being poisoned by the witch. Afterward, the entity interrupted the mourners by singing and drinking songs. In 1821, Betsy Bell called off her engagement to Joshua Gardner due to the witch's treatment. Subsequently, the entity told the family it would leave but return in 7 years in 1828. The witch returned on time to Lucy and her sons Richard and Joel, doing similar activities as before, but they chose not to encourage it, and the witch appeared to leave again. Several accounts say that Andrew Jackson was intrigued by the story during his military career, and his men were frightened away after traveling to investigate. In an independent oral tradition recorded near Panola County, Mississippi, the witch was the ghost of an unpleasant overseer, John Bell, murdered in North Carolina. In this tradition, the spirit falls in love with the central character Mary, leading to her death. This account is reminiscent of vampire lore. The supernatural powers attributed to the Tennessee spirit have also been compared to that of jinn in mythology. The Ghost of Bellamy Bridge in Marianna, Florida. The story of the Ghost of Bellamy Bridge is Florida's most famous ghost story. It is centered around an old steel frame bridge that spans the Chipola River in the swamps north of Marianna. The legend holds that the restless ghost of a young woman named Elizabeth Jane Bellamy roams the swamps around the bridge on dark and foggy nights. The wife of one of Florida's critical antebellum economic and political leaders, she is buried in an overgrown family cemetery not far from the skeletal remains of the old bridge. Bellamy Bridge is not accessible by car, but can be reached via the half-mile Bellamy Bridge Heritage Trail on Highway 162 north of Marianna. The trail parking area is 1/10 a mile west of the current Chipola River Bridge. The trail is open during daylight hours. The story of Bellamy Bridge's ghost is a tale of 2 stories. The first is the ghost story, a legend that has evolved over 100 years. The other is the true story of Elizabeth Jane Bellamy, which is far removed from the legendary tale. When the 2 stories are combined, they create a unique lesson in how natural history can join with fiction to create popular folklore. Let's start with the legend. It holds that Elizabeth was the beautiful young bride of a prominent Jackson County planter, politician, and bank examiner named Dr. Samuel C. Bellamy. They were deeply in love and planned for their wedding in the backyard of a beautiful mansion Dr. Bellamy supposedly built for his wife-to-be in nearby Marianna. The wedding is said to have been remarkable, attracting guests and gifts from as far away as Europe. The 2 were wed in a garden of roses, and their vows each promised to love the other forever. In the hours following the wedding, however, storytellers hold that a horrible tragedy struck the young couple. They say Elizabeth was either dancing with her new husband or resting upstairs in a comfortable chair, the stories vary, when her long gown suddenly came in contact with a candle or an open fireplace. The rich material burst into flames, and before her husband or any of their guests could react, Elizabeth ran screaming from the house. Overcome by the fire, she was injured. The young woman survived for a few days, writhing in incredible agony, before finding peace in the arms of death. Her body was taken to the plantation of Samuel's brother, Dr. Edward C. Bellamy, and laid to rest in a grove of trees near the Chipola River. The legend holds, however, that the grave was unable to contain her love for her lost husband. A spectral figure dressed in white began to appear at night along the banks of the river. In later years, when Bellamy Bridge was built at the site, her ghost was often seen in the swamps surrounding it. It is a fascinating tale, but is it true? That's been a question for years, and the answer is just as colorful and tragic as the ghost story itself. Samuel and Elizabeth Bellamy were real people. He was the son of a wealthy planter, and she was the daughter of General William Croom. They grew up near each other in North Carolina, but she was still a young girl when he left home to study medicine at the University of Pennsylvania. Their courtship began when Samuel's older brother Edward married Elizabeth's older sister, Anne. Even though Samuel was 9 years her elder, the two families approved of the match, and records verify that the two were married on July 15, 1834, in North Carolina, and 3 years before the supposed Florida wedding and fire. Both the Croom and Bellamy families took great interest in the vast lands available for settlement in the new territory of Florida. Elizabeth's brother, Dr. Hardy Bryan Croom, lived in Florida. Not long before, the two Bellamy brothers and their wives decided to relocate to the territory. Edward and Anne purchased the Fort Plantation where Bellamy Bridge stands today. At the same time, Samuel and Elizabeth acquired land they called the Rock Cave Plantation along Baker Creek, a few miles northwest of Mariana. They lived there with their young son, Alexander, and more than 80 enslaved Africans they had brought with them from North Carolina. The lands along the Chipola River and Baker Creek were ideal for growing cotton and sugarcane, and the plantations prospered. However, the swamps were also breeding grounds for mosquitoes. Sicknesses such as malaria and yellow fever plagued the early settlers of the area, and it was from fever, not fire, that Elizabeth met her death. Samuel's letters and an obituary in the Tallahassee Floridian indicate that she died from fever on May 11, 1837. She was only 18 years old at the time. Elizabeth was likely being cared for by her sister Anne when she died. She was laid to rest in a grove of trees near the site where Bellamy Bridge stands today. 1 week later, her young son Alexander also died from fever and was buried by her side. Samuel Bellamy never remarried, and the old legend correctly asserts that he mourned for his wife for the rest of his life. He was a delegate to Florida's Constitutional Convention, clerk of courts for Jackson County, and secretary for the Florida Supreme Court. He took his own life in 1853 by cutting his throat with a razor at Chattahoochee, Florida. The massive mansion that legend holds he built for his young bride did not stand during her lifetime, but it started 9 months after her death. It was demolished during the 20th century and survives today only in faded photographs. So how did a ghost story about a woman burning to death on her wedding night evolve from the true story of a young wife who died from fever when she was 18 years old? The answer to that question is as fascinating as the legend itself. During the final days of her life, the famed 19th century novelist Caroline Lee Hentz lived in Mariana. As time passed, people began associating the places described in her novels with real places in Jackson County. For example, her Long Moss Spring is now commonly associated with Blue Springs, even though she wrote about her spring well before she moved to Mariana. Here is a list of other ghost stories you could research. Sloss Furnaces in Birmingham, Alabama. The Crying Lady in the Dakota in New York, New York. The Ghosts of the Crescent Hotel in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. Hug and Molly in Abbeville, Alabama. The Surrency House Ghost in Surrency, Georgia. The Ghost of Deer Island in Biloxi, Mississippi. Zombie Road in Wildwood, Missouri. Dead Woman's Crossing in Weatherford, Oklahoma. The last one for today. the Myrtles Plantation in St. Francisville, Louisiana. There we have it, so look at some ghost stories. That will wrap up this episode of Paul's Funhouse. Join me again next time. September is Suicide Prevention Month, so that we will be talking about suicide prevention. Until then, stay tuned and stay weird.
This is Paul's Funhouse, where the show never ends. Tell all your buddies it's gonna be a wild ride. Join us next time for more fun and games. Like and subscribe and spread the word. Tell all your friends and get your tickets now to Paul.